I stood in my driveway staring at the mangled front end of my brand new sedan, while my sister Ashley climbed out casually, brushing glass fragments off her designer jacket. The headlight hung by electrical wires, the bumper crumpled like aluminum foil, and deep scratches carved ugly lines across the metallic blue paint I had admired every morning for 3 months. Ashley shrugged and said it wasn't that bad, just a little fender bender. When my parents arrived and saw the destruction, Mom immediately defended her. She was trying to impress people at that college party. I smiled calmly and replied, "Good thing it's not my car anymore." 3 months earlier, I had finally achieved something I had dreamed about since graduating college 4 years ago. After endless months of riding the Phoenix City bus system and calling rideshare drivers at ridiculous hours, I walked into Southwest Auto Solutions with a cashier's check for $18,000. Every penny came from sacrificing dinners out, skipping vacations, and working overtime as a marketing coordinator at a small advertising firm downtown. The sedan I chose was perfect for my 26-year-old lifestyle. Reliable, efficient, but with just enough style to make me feel successful when I pulled into client meetings. Marcus, the finance manager, walked me through every detail of the purchase agreement while I signed papers with hands trembling from excitement. The moment I turned the key and heard that engine purr to life, I felt like I had finally made it as an independent adult. Tom, my boyfriend of 2 years, met me at the dealership to celebrate. As an electrician, he understood the value of hard work and financial planning. We drove to our favorite diner on Camelback Road, where I kept glancing through the window at my new car parked under the streetlight. Tom reached across the booth and squeezed my hand, telling me how proud he felt watching me achieve this goal through pure determination. For 3 perfect weeks, I enjoyed the freedom of reliable transportation. My boss, Diane, noticed I arrived at work earlier and stayed later, now that I could control my schedule. Client presentations became easier when I could drive directly to their offices instead of coordinating complex public transit routes. I even started grocery shopping at stores farther from my apartment because I could finally carry more than 2 bags home. Then Ashley returned from her sophomore year at Arizona State University. My sister had always possessed a talent for making everything about herself. At 22, she had perfected the art of looking helpless while manipulating others into solving her problems. Within hours of arriving home for summer break, she began complaining about the lack of transportation options for her internship interviews around the valley. My parents, Pat and Linda, immediately turned their attention to my new car. During Sunday dinner at their house in Scottsdale, Dad suggested I could help Ashley get to her appointments since we were family and should support each other. Mom nodded enthusiastically, adding that Ashley needed to make good impressions during these crucial interviews that would shape her future career. I agreed to drive Ashley to a few interviews, thinking it would be temporary help. But by the 3rd week, Ashley was asking to borrow the car for entire afternoons to run personal errands and meet friends for lunch. When I hesitated, pointing out that I needed the car for my own work obligations, my parents exchanged disappointed looks. "Jan, you have to remember that Ashley is still learning how to navigate the adult world," Mom said during another family dinner. "You've been established in your career for years now. Surely you can share for just 1 summer to help your sister get started." Dad leaned back in his chair, using his stern voice that had always made me comply as a child. "We raised you girls to look out for each other. Ashley would do the same for you if the situation were reversed." Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Ashley borrow the car on weekends when I didn't have work commitments. I made it clear that she needed to ask permission first, return it with the same amount of gas, and treat it with respect since I was still making monthly insurance payments. The first weekend, Ashley borrowed my car. She returned it 3 hours later than promised. I walked outside to find new scratches along the passenger side door and an empty gas tank. When I asked what happened, Ashley rolled her eyes and said, "Accidents happen when you park downtown." She tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and headed upstairs to her room, dismissing my concerns with a wave of her hand. "It's just a few little scratches. January, you're being way too sensitive about a stupid car." People are going to think you're shallow if you freak out over every tiny thing. Standing there, looking at the damage to my beautiful sedan, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't about being sensitive. This was about respect for my hard work and my property. But when I tried to explain this to Ashley, she interrupted me to say she deserved nice things too since she was working so hard in college. Over the next month, I began to notice a disturbing pattern in my family dynamics that I had somehow missed for years. Ashley's sense of entitlement extended far beyond borrowing my car occasionally. She started taking it without asking permission, leaving me stranded at my apartment on weekday mornings when I needed to get to important client meetings. The first time this happened, I called Tom in a panic at 6:30 in the morning. My car was gone, Ashley wasn't answering her phone, and I had a presentation for a major client at 9 o'clock. Tom immediately left his job site to pick me up, but we hit morning rush hour traffic and I arrived 15 minutes late. Diane covered for me with the client, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. When Ashley finally returned that evening, she acted surprised that I needed the car for work. She had driven to Tempe to have breakfast with friends from college, then spent the afternoon at a spa getting her nails done for a date that night. My parents, rather than addressing her inconsiderate behavior, suggested I should communicate my schedule better so Ashley could plan around my needs. "Sweetie, Ashley didn't know you had something important," Mom said when I called to complain. "You can't expect her to read your mind about your work calendar." The fact that I worked Monday through Friday at regular business hours had somehow become a surprise that required special communication. I started finding evidence that Ashley was treating my car like her personal vehicle. Expensive cosmetic products that I had never seen before appeared in the glove compartment. The seats were adjusted to accommodate someone taller than me, and my preset radio stations had been changed to pop music stations I never listened to. Worst of all, someone had been smoking in the car despite my explicit rule against it. The smell lingered in the fabric seats, no matter how much air freshener I used. When I confronted Ashley about the smoking, she denied it completely. But I found cigarette ashes in the cup holders and a lighter that didn't belong to me, wedged between the driver's seat cushions. Ashley claimed her friend Brad must have left his lighter behind, and she couldn't control what other people did when they were passengers in the car. Tom's brother Steve, who worked as a contract lawyer, happened to visit during this period. Over dinner at Tom's apartment, I found myself venting about the car situation. Steve listened carefully, asking detailed questions about the financial arrangements and legal ownership of the vehicle. He seemed particularly interested when I mentioned that Ashley was allowing other people to drive without my permission. "Jan, you realize you're liable for anything that happens when someone else is driving your car, right?" Steve said. "If Ashley gets into an accident or lets some unlicensed friend take the wheel, your insurance company is going to come after you for damages." Nancy, a family friend who had known us since childhood, made an observation that stopped me cold during a chance encounter at the grocery store. She had seen Ashley around town several times driving my car, and Ashley had told people the sedan was a graduation gift from our parents. According to Nancy, Ashley was posting photos on social media claiming ownership of the car and even adding her own decorative accessories to the interior. I immediately checked Ashley's Instagram account and found multiple photos of her posing with my car, captions talking about her new ride, and thanking her followers for the compliments. She had hung fuzzy dice from the rearview mirror and placed a decorative air freshener shaped like a palm tree on the dashboard. These additions might seem minor, but they represented something much larger. Ashley genuinely believed the car belonged to her now. When I showed these posts to my parents, expecting them to be as shocked as I was, they seemed more concerned about my reaction than Ashley's deception. "Jan, you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be," Dad said. "Ashley is young and excited about having access to a nice car. You can't blame her for wanting to show it off to her friends." Mom nodded in agreement. "Remember, when you were her age, you probably would have done the same thing. Ashley will learn responsibility as she gets older, but right now, she's just having fun." The conversation that followed revealed how differently my parents remembered my own young adulthood. According to them, I had received similar support and privileges when I was Ashley's age. But when I pressed for specific examples, they couldn't name a single time they had given me unlimited access to their vehicles or made financial sacrifices to support my social life. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I remembered working part-time jobs throughout college to pay for my own expenses, while Ashley received an allowance that covered not just necessities but entertainment and luxury purchases. I had taken student loans that I was still paying off while Ashley's tuition was covered completely by our parents' savings account. This realization hit me like cold water on a hot day. My parents had rewritten family history to justify their continued favoritism toward Ashley, and I had been too busy trying to be the responsible daughter to notice the inequality. The final incident that month occurred on a Wednesday morning when I desperately needed the car for a crucial client presentation that could determine whether my company secured a six-figure contract. Ashley had taken the car the night before for another date with Brad, promising to return it by midnight. At 6 a.m, the car still sat empty in the driveway, but my keys were nowhere to be found. I searched the entire house, called Ashley multiple times with no answer, and finally had to confess to Diane that I couldn't get to the presentation. Tom offered to drive me, but he was already committed to an emergency electrical repair job that couldn't be postponed. I ended up taking a rideshare that cost $60 and made me 45 minutes late to the most important meeting of my career. Ashley returned home that afternoon, acting completely casual about the situation. She had gone back to Brad's apartment after their date and fallen asleep, forgetting that I might need the car for work. When I explained how her carelessness had jeopardized my professional reputation, she accused me of being dramatic about something that wasn't really her fault. I can't help it if you have bad timing with your work stuff. January, I had plans first, and Brad was really looking forward to showing me his new apartment. You should be more flexible about these things. That night, lying awake in my bed while Ashley slept peacefully down the hall, I realized something fundamental had shifted in my perspective. I was no longer dealing with a thoughtless sister who needed gentle guidance about responsibility. I was being taken advantage of by someone who felt entitled to my property and my parents' protection, regardless of how her actions affected my life. 2 weeks later, Ashley announced her most audacious plan yet. She needed to borrow my car for an entire week to drive her college friends to a summer music festival in Flagstaff, about 250 miles north of Phoenix. The festival ran from Thursday through Sunday, but Ashley explained she wanted to leave early Wednesday to secure a good camping spot and stay through Monday morning to help her friends pack up their equipment. It'll be like a road trip. January. We're all splitting the gas money, so it won't cost you anything. And Brad knows the area really well since his family has a cabin up there, so we'll be super careful on those mountain roads. I immediately said no. The following week included 3 client presentations that I had been preparing for over a month, plus a company retreat on Saturday that was mandatory for all employees. I explained that I absolutely needed reliable transportation and couldn't risk being stranded during such a critical time for my career. Ashley's response was to run straight to our parents. Within an hour, I received a phone call from Mom asking me to reconsider my decision. Ashley had already promised her friends they could use the car for the trip, and backing out now would embarrass her in front of people she was trying to impress. Dad took the phone and used his most serious tone to explain that family loyalty meant making sacrifices for each other, even when it was inconvenient. Jan. Ashley has been looking forward to this festival for months. She's been working hard at her internship, and she deserves to have some fun with her friends. You can take the bus to work for a few days. It's not going to kill you. When I pointed out that I had already taken the bus to work for years before buying my car, and that my current job responsibilities required more flexibility than public transportation could provide, my parents dismissed my concerns as excuses. You're being selfish, honey, Mom said. Ashley is still young and needs these experiences to develop socially. Your job will understand if you explain the situation. I'm sure your boss is a reasonable person. The conversation escalated when I refused to change my mind. Dad's voice grew stern and angry, reminding me of all the ways the family had supported me over the years. Mom started crying, saying she never expected me to become so materialistic and unfeeling toward my own sister. If you can't share with your sister when she really needs help, then maybe you need to think about what kind of person you're becoming, Dad said. We raised you better than this, January. We're very disappointed in your attitude. Ashley, listening from the background, added her own emotional manipulation to the conversation. She accused me of being jealous of her social life and trying to sabotage her friendships because I was bitter about being older and less popular. According to Ashley, I had always resented her for being more outgoing and attractive, and now I was using my car as a weapon to hurt her. Jan just wants to control everything because she's miserable with her own boring life, Ashley said loud enough for me to hear through the phone. She can't stand that people actually like being around me. When I still refused to hand over my keys, my parents threatened to cut off contact with me entirely. They said if I couldn't be part of a loving, supportive family, then maybe I needed to learn what life was like without family support at all. This threat revealed something crucial about my family dynamics. My parents' love and acceptance had always been conditional on my compliance with their wishes, particularly when those wishes involved accommodating Ashley's demands. Standing up for my own needs was being interpreted as selfishness and betrayal. I spent that night researching my own childhood and adolescent experiences, looking through old photos and school documents to verify my memories against my parents' revisionist history. What I found confirmed my growing suspicions. I had never received the kind of unconditional support and financial assistance that Ashley took for granted. During my college years, I had worked 20 to 30 hours per week at a campus bookstore to pay for textbooks, meals, and basic living expenses. My parents had contributed toward my tuition, but I had taken student loans to cover the remainder. Meanwhile, Ashley's college experience was being funded entirely through their savings, with additional monthly allowances for entertainment and shopping. When I was Ashley's age, I had driven a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner and a transmission that occasionally refused to shift into third gear. I had never asked to borrow my parents' cars for social activities because I understood they needed their vehicles for work and family obligations. Tom's family offered to provide alternative transportation solutions when they heard about the festival conflict. His parents had an extra car that I could borrow for the week, and Tom volunteered to adjust his work schedule to drive me to client meetings if necessary. But when I presented these options to my parents, they rejected them as unnecessary complications. This isn't about transportation, January Mom said. This is about being willing to sacrifice for family. If you're not willing to let Ashley use your car, then offering other solutions just proves you're being stubborn. The real crisis began on Tuesday evening when Ashley simply took my keys without permission. I had hidden them in my bedroom, but she went through my purse and dresser drawers while I was in the shower. By the time I discovered the theft, Ashley was already on the highway heading north with her friends. I called my parents immediately, expecting them to be as outraged as I was about Ashley literally stealing my car. Instead, they defended her actions as desperate measures forced by my unreasonable refusal to share. Honey, Ashley was in an impossible situation because you backed her into a corner, Mom said. She had already committed to her friends, and you left her no choice but to take matters into her own hands. Dad agreed completely. If you had been reasonable about this from the beginning, Ashley wouldn't have had to resort to such drastic measures. This is really your fault for being so inflexible. For the next 4 days, I was completely stranded. I had to call in sick on Wednesday and Thursday, missing 2 crucial client presentations that Diane had to handle personally. The company retreat on Saturday was postponed for me specifically, creating awkwardness with my colleagues who had to reschedule their weekend plans. Tom did his best to help, but his own work obligations made it impossible for him to provide consistent transportation. Ashley didn't answer her phone for the entire duration of the trip. I had no way to reach her in case of emergencies, no idea where exactly she was camping, and no guarantee that my car was being treated with care. For all I knew, she could have been in an accident or breakdown situation that would leave me financially responsible for repairs and legal consequences. When Ashley finally returned on Monday afternoon, She acted surprised that I was upset about the situation. The car reeked of cigarette smoke and alcohol. There were muddy footprints on the seats, and the mileage indicated she had driven far more than the round trip to Flagstaff would require. Camping gear and trash filled the trunk, and someone had spilled something sticky on the dashboard that had attracted insects. God, Jan, you're acting like something terrible happened. We had an amazing time, and your car worked perfectly the whole trip. You should be grateful that we proved how reliable it is. But I wasn't grateful. I was finally, completely done. The Monday after Ashley returned from her unauthorized festival trip, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to argue with my family or hoping they would eventually recognize Ashley's inappropriate behavior, I called Steve and asked for a legal consultation. Steve met me at a coffee shop near his downtown office during his lunch break. I brought a folder containing documentation I had started collecting over the previous month. Photos of the car's condition before and after Ashley's use, screenshots of her social media posts claiming ownership, records of unauthorized charges on my credit card that I had discovered, and a detailed timeline of incidents where Ashley had taken the car without permission. Jan, I have to ask you something directly, Steve said after reviewing my documentation. Are you prepared to take serious legal action that might permanently damage your relationship with your family? I told him I was more interested in finding a way to protect myself legally while teaching my family a lesson about consequences and respect. Steve smiled and explained that there were several options for temporary ownership transfers that could accomplish exactly what I wanted. What you're describing is essentially a trust arrangement where you maintain ultimate control over the asset while transferring immediate legal responsibility to a third party. If Ashley damages the car or gets into legal trouble, the consequences fall on whoever holds current ownership rather than you. Steve explained that I could legally transfer ownership of my car to Tom through a carefully structured trust agreement. The paperwork would be legitimate and binding, but designed to revert ownership back to me after a specified period or under certain conditions. In the meantime, Tom would be legally responsible for insurance, damages, and any liability issues arising from the car's use. The beauty of this arrangement, Steve continued, is that Ashley and your parents can continue assuming you're being generous by sharing the car, while you're actually protected from any financial or legal consequences of their choices. Over the next 2 weeks, Steve helped me prepare the necessary legal documents. The trust arrangement was more complex than a simple ownership transfer because it included specific provisions for reverting control back to me while ensuring that all documentation would be legal and enforceable. Tom was initially hesitant about taking on legal responsibility for my car, but he understood my frustration with Ashley's behavior and wanted to support my decision to set boundaries. We agreed that he would maintain comprehensive insurance coverage and that any major decisions about the car's use would still require my input, even though he would be the legal owner during the trust period. The paperwork required notarization and filing with the appropriate state agencies, which took almost 3 weeks to complete. During this time, I had to continue allowing Ashley to use the car occasionally to avoid raising suspicion about my plans. Each incident reinforced my determination to follow through with the legal protection strategy. One particularly infuriating event occurred when I discovered Ashley had been using my credit card to pay for gas and convenience store purchases. The card had been in my glove compartment for emergency purposes, and Ashley had simply started using it without asking permission. When I confronted her about the unauthorized charges totaling over $300, she acted genuinely surprised that I considered this stealing. Jan, it's your car and your gas tank, so obviously it makes sense to use your credit card for car expenses. I thought you would appreciate me taking initiative to keep the tank full instead of returning it empty like you always complain about. When I explained that using someone else's credit card without permission was illegal regardless of the reasoning, Ashley rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic about a few dollars. Our parents supported her position, pointing out that the money was being spent on legitimate car-related expenses rather than personal purchases. Honey, Ashley is just learning how to manage these kinds of responsibilities, Mom said. You should be proud that she's thinking about keeping the car maintained instead of criticizing her for trying to be helpful. This incident provided the final evidence I needed to prove that my family would continue enabling Ashley's increasingly entitled behavior, regardless of how clearly I explained the problems with her actions. They had convinced themselves that Ashley's intentions mattered more than her actual behavior, and nothing I said was going to change their perspective. Steve filed the final trust documents on a Thursday afternoon, and the legal ownership transfer became official the following Monday. Tom received new registration papers and insurance documentation, while I maintained copies of the trust agreement that would allow me to reclaim ownership when I chose to terminate the arrangement. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control over the situation. Ashley could continue treating the car like her personal property, my parents could continue defending her behavior, and I could remain completely protected from any consequences of their choices. The only thing left to do was wait for the inevitable disaster. With the legal paperwork complete and Tom officially listed as the car's owner, I found myself in the strange position of watching my family's dynamics from a protected distance. Ashley continued her pattern of taking the car without permission, but now every instance of her irresponsible behavior was creating liability for Tom rather than me. Tom understood his role perfectly. He maintained comprehensive insurance coverage that would protect him from major financial loss, and he documented every instance when Ashley used the car without his explicit permission. According to our agreement, Ashley was supposed to ask Tom for permission rather than me, but she never bothered to follow this protocol because she assumed the car was still essentially mine. 3 weeks after the ownership transfer, Ashley announced another ambitious plan. She wanted to take the car for a long weekend beach trip to San Diego with her boyfriend Brad and several other college friends. The group planned to stay at a beachfront rental house and needed reliable transportation for driving between parties and beach activities. I listened to Ashley's enthusiastic description of the trip while internally calculating the potential legal and financial risks. San Diego was over 300 miles away. The group would be drinking alcohol at beach parties, and Brad had mentioned that his driver's license had been suspended following a previous accident involving texting while driving. The house we rented has parking for like 6 cars, so we won't have to worry about street parking or anything like that. And Brad knows all the best spots for beach volleyball and clubs where we can get in, even though some of us aren't 21 yet. When I suggested that Ashley might want to check with Tom before making definitive plans involving his car, she looked at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. Why would I need to ask Tom? It's not like he drives it or anything. You're just being weird about this because you want to control everything I do. Ashley's assumption revealed how completely she had ignored the legal ownership change that I had explained to the family weeks earlier. In her mind, the car still belonged to me, and asking Tom for permission was just an unnecessary bureaucratic step that she could safely skip. Over the following days, I watched Ashley make elaborate preparations for the beach trip without once contacting Tom to discuss insurance coverage, liability concerns, or basic permission to take his vehicle to another state. She packed beach equipment in the trunk, made playlists for the drive, and coordinated complex logistics with her friends, all while treating the car like her personal property. Tom and I agreed that he wouldn't volunteer his concerns about the trip unless Ashley specifically asked for his permission. This decision was strategic rather than petty. We wanted to document that Ashley was making assumptions about access to someone else's property without following appropriate protocols. The weekend before the planned beach trip, Ashley casually mentioned that Brad would be doing most of the driving because he was more familiar with California highways. When I pointed out that Brad's license was currently suspended, Ashley waved off my concerns as typical overprotective sister behavior. Brad's suspension is just for like 6 more weeks, and it's only because of some stupid texting thing that wasn't even his fault. He's actually a really good driver when he's not distracted by people messaging him constantly. I asked Ashley if she had discussed any of these details with Tom, since he would be legally responsible for anything that happened during the trip. Ashley's response was to accuse me of trying to sabotage her plans by creating unnecessary complications. I don't know why you keep bringing up Tom like he has some kind of authority over this. You're the one who bought the car. You're the one who makes decisions about it, and you're the one who needs to stop being so controlling about everything. That conversation confirmed that Ashley had no understanding of the legal implications of the ownership transfer. She believed the trust arrangement was merely a paperwork technicality that didn't affect her practical access to the vehicle. This misconception was about to become very expensive for her. On Thursday evening, Ashley loaded the car with beach equipment, coolers, and luggage for herself and 3 friends. She had arranged to pick up Brad and 2 other people early Friday morning for the drive to San Diego. The group planned to return Sunday night, giving them 3 full days of beach parties and club activities. Tom and I watched from his apartment window as Ashley made her final preparations, adjusting the driver's seat and mirrors to accommodate Brad's height. She had borrowed beach umbrellas from my parents, filled multiple coolers with food and drinks, and even attached a temporary roof rack to carry additional equipment. "Are you sure about letting this happen?" Tom asked as we watched Ashley check her packing list one final time. "I mean, I know we planned this whole thing, but seeing her actually drive away with my car is making me nervous." I reminded Tom that Ashley had never asked his permission for the trip, never discussed insurance implications, and never acknowledged that he was the legal owner responsible for anything that happened. If she wanted to treat someone else's property like her own, she needed to learn what happened when that assumption proved incorrect. "Besides," I added, "this is probably going to be the wake-up call that finally gets through to my parents about enabling her behavior. Sometimes people need to face real consequences before they understand why rules exist." Ashley left Friday morning right on schedule, posting cheerful photos on social media of her loaded car and excited friends preparing for their beach adventure. The posts showed Brad in the driver's seat despite his suspended license, coolers full of alcohol despite Ashley being under 21, and geotags indicating they were heading west toward California. For the entire weekend, I felt an unusual sense of peace. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where my former car was located, who was driving it, and what my legal exposure would be if something went wrong. The answer to that last question was absolutely zero. Tom maintained his comprehensive insurance coverage and kept copies of all documentation, proving that Ashley had never asked permission for the trip. If anything happened in San Diego, Ashley would be personally responsible for damages, while Tom's insurance would cover the basics. Meanwhile, I could continue my normal weekend activities without worrying about transportation emergencies or unexpected expenses. Ashley posted regular updates throughout the weekend, showing beach volleyball games, sunset dinners at expensive restaurants, and late-night club activities. The posts made it clear that the group was spending significant money on entertainment and alcohol, suggesting they had planned this as a luxury vacation rather than a simple weekend getaway. Sunday evening came and went without Ashley returning as scheduled. By Monday morning, she still hadn't posted any updates or responded to messages from our parents asking about her arrival time. Tom and I began to wonder if something had gone wrong with the car or if the group had simply decided to extend their vacation without considering the implications. We didn't have to wait long to find out what had happened. Monday afternoon, I received a phone call that changed everything. Ashley was calling from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, her voice shaking and defensive, asking me to wire money for bail and legal fees. She had been arrested following a car accident that occurred early Sunday morning when Brad, driving under the influence on my former Sedan, struck a mailbox and damaged a residential fence while trying to navigate narrow residential streets near their rental house. "Jan, you have to help me out here. This whole situation is totally unfair and not even really my fault. Brad was just trying to find parking after we came back from this club, and the streets are super confusing in that neighborhood. The accident was really minor, but the police are making it into this huge deal." I listened to Ashley's explanation while taking detailed notes about the legal situation. According to her account, Brad had been driving because Ashley was too tired after a long day at the beach. They had been drinking at a nightclub until around 2 in the morning, then decided to move the car to a different parking location closer to their rental house. Brad, whose license was already suspended for previous violations, had struck a decorative mailbox while attempting a three-point turn on a narrow residential street. The impact had been hard enough to damage the front bumper, break the right headlight, and create deep scratches along the passenger side of the car. Additionally, the car had veered into a wooden fence, breaking several boards and damaging the property owner's landscaping. The people who live there are being completely unreasonable about the whole thing, Ashley continued. It's just a stupid mailbox and a few pieces of wood. Their insurance should cover it, but they're insisting on filing police reports and making everything complicated. What Ashley failed to mention initially was that the homeowner had called police because Brad attempted to leave the scene without providing insurance information or contact details. When officers arrived, they discovered Brad's suspended license and conducted field sobriety tests that confirmed he had been drinking. Ashley, as the registered owner according to the information she had provided, was being held responsible for allowing an unlicensed, intoxicated driver to operate the vehicle. Ashley, I said carefully, I need you to understand something very important. That car doesn't belong to me anymore. It legally belongs to Tom, and you never asked his permission to take it to California. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. When Ashley spoke again, her voice had changed from defensive to confused. What are you talking about, Jan? Of course, it's your car. You bought it, you make the payments, you make all the decisions about it. This whole Tom thing is just some weird paperwork situation that doesn't actually mean anything. I explained that the ownership transfer was completely legal and binding, making Tom responsible for insurance claims, while making Ashley personally liable for any damages or legal consequences arising from her unauthorized use of his property. The fact that she had never asked Tom for permission to take the car to California, combined with her decision to let an unlicensed driver operate the vehicle, meant she had violated multiple laws while using someone else's property. But you never told me I really couldn't use it anymore, Ashley said, her voice rising to a near shout. You guys were just playing some kind of game with the paperwork. I thought you were being dramatic about the whole thing. The legal implications were becoming clear as I spoke with Ashley. Brad faced charges for driving under the influence, operating a vehicle with a suspended license, leaving the scene of an accident, and property destruction. Ashley faced charges for allowing an unlicensed driver to operate a vehicle she didn't own, providing false information to police about vehicle ownership, and conspiracy to leave the scene of an accident. Additionally, the homeowner whose property had been damaged was threatening to file a civil lawsuit for repair costs, property damage, and emotional distress. Their insurance company was refusing to cover the damages because the incident involved unlicensed, intoxicated driving, and potential criminal activity. Ashley, I need to be very clear about this, I told her. I cannot help you with bail money or legal fees because I'm not responsible for any of this situation. You need to call Tom and explain what happened, since it's his car that was involved in the accident. Ashley's response was to start crying and accusing me of setting her up for legal trouble as revenge for her using the car without permission. According to her logic, I had deliberately created a situation where she would be held responsible for consequences that should normally fall on the car's owner. You knew I didn't understand all that legal stuff, January. You should have made it more clear that I couldn't use the car anymore if you really meant it. This is entrapment or something illegal like that. I suggested Ashley call our parents for support, since they had consistently defended her behavior and insisted that I should accommodate her transportation needs regardless of my own concerns. If they believed Ashley deserved access to family resources for her social activities, they could provide the financial assistance she needed to resolve her legal problems. The conversation ended with Ashley hanging up on me, but not before screaming that I was a terrible sister who had deliberately sabotaged her vacation to make her look bad in front of her friends. 2 hours later, my parents called. Jan, we just heard from Ashley about this terrible situation in San Diego, Mom said, her voice strained with worry. She explained how you transferred the car to Tom without making it clear that she couldn't use it anymore. We need you to fix this mess immediately, Dad took the phone and used his sternest, authoritarian tone to demand that I take responsibility for Ashley's legal problems. According to their understanding of the situation, I had created unnecessary complications with the ownership transfer, and now I needed to resolve the consequences of my poor decision-making. This whole thing happened because you were being petty about sharing with your sister, Dad said. Ashley never would have gotten into trouble if you had just been reasonable about letting her use the car like a normal, generous sister would. When I explained that Ashley had been arrested for allowing an unlicensed, intoxicated driver to operate someone else's vehicle without permission, my parents dismissed these details as technicalities that didn't address the real problem. "Honey, Ashley is young and she makes mistakes sometimes," Mom said. "But this whole legal situation only happened because you created confusion about who owns the car. If you had been clear and direct about your restrictions, Ashley would have made different choices." I asked my parents if they were prepared to provide the several $1,000s that Ashley would need for bail, legal representation, and civil liability for the property damage she had caused. Their response revealed the financial limits of their support for Ashley's irresponsible behavior. "Jan, you know we don't have that kind of money available right now," Dad said. "We've been supporting Ashley through college, and we can't afford unexpected legal expenses. You need to work with Tom to resolve this through insurance or something." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with my parents alternating between demanding that I fix Ashley's problems and explaining why they couldn't provide the financial assistance she needed. They wanted Ashley to be rescued from consequences, but they expected someone else to pay for that rescue. When I suggested they contact Tom directly to discuss the situation, since he was the legal owner of the vehicle involved in the accident, my parents seemed genuinely surprised that Tom might have opinions about Ashley's use of his property. "Why would Tom care about any of this?" Mom asked. "It's not like he was planning to use the car himself. This is really a family matter that should be handled between you and Ashley." I explained that Tom was now legally responsible for insurance claims, civil liability, and any damages to his vehicle resulting from Ashley's unauthorized use. He would need to decide whether to file insurance claims, pursue legal action against Ashley for damages, or absorb the financial losses himself. "But that's not fair to Ashley," Dad protested. "She had no way of knowing that Tom would actually enforce some kind of ownership rules about the car. She was just trying to have fun with her friends like any normal young person." The phone conversation ended when I told my parents that Ashley's legal problems were the natural consequences of her decision to take someone else's vehicle without permission and allow an unlicensed, intoxicated driver to operate it in violation of multiple laws. If they wanted to help her, they were welcome to provide financial support, but I would not be taking responsibility for problems I had not created. That evening, Tom received his own phone call from Ashley, who had managed to contact him using someone else's phone from the detention center. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes, because Tom had very simple questions that Ashley could not answer satisfactorily. Had she asked his permission to take his car to California? No. Had she informed him that an unlicensed driver would be operating his vehicle? No. Had she considered the insurance implications of allowing intoxicated, unlicensed driving? No. Was she prepared to accept financial responsibility for all damages and legal costs resulting from her unauthorized use of his property? Also no. Ashley kept saying it wasn't fair for me to hold her responsible for something she didn't understand. Tom told me later, but when I asked if she had bothered to read any of the ownership transfer paperwork or ask any questions about her responsibilities, she admitted she had just assumed it didn't really affect her access to the car. Tom filed a police report for unauthorized use of his vehicle and contacted his insurance company to report the incident as theft rather than permitted use. This decision would protect him from liability while making Ashley personally responsible for all damages and legal consequences. Tuesday morning, Ashley called me one final time from the detention center, begging me to convince Tom to change his approach to the insurance claims. "Jan, please. You have to make Tom understand that I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'll pay him back for everything. I promise. I just need him to handle this through insurance so I don't get charged with stealing his car. I told Ashley that she would need to have that conversation with Tom directly, since the car belonged to him and the legal decisions were his to make. If she wanted to negotiate a payment plan for damages or legal costs, she could propose that to him without my involvement. But you're his girlfriend, January. Hell, listen to you if you explain that I've learned my lesson and won't ever do anything like this again. Please don't let him ruin my life over one stupid mistake. Ashley's definition of one stupid mistake included taking someone else's vehicle without permission, allowing an unlicensed driver to operate it while intoxicated, causing property damage, attempting to leave the scene of an accident, and providing false information to law enforcement officers. From my perspective, these were multiple deliberate choices that demonstrated exactly the kind of entitlement and disregard for consequences that had been building for months. The conversation ended when I told Ashley that she was an adult facing the legal consequences of her own decisions, and no one else was obligated to rescue her from problems she had created through her own choices. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely proud of setting clear boundaries with my family and sticking to them despite pressure and emotional manipulation. 3 weeks later, Ashley sat in our parents' living room signing legal documents that would govern her financial responsibility for the San Diego incident and establish clear boundaries for any future interactions involving other people's property. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Gone was the casual entitlement that had characterized her behavior for years, replaced by genuine understanding of consequences and accountability. Tom had agreed to a payment plan that allowed Ashley to avoid the most serious criminal charges in exchange for accepting full financial responsibility for vehicle repairs, property damage, legal fees, and insurance deductibles. The total amount came to just over $8,000, which Ashley would pay through monthly installments over the next 3 years while working a part-time job during college and a full-time position during summer breaks. I honestly had no idea how expensive it would be when someone gets hurt or when property gets damaged, Ashley said as she signed the final payment agreement. I thought insurance just covered everything automatically, and I never considered that letting Brad drive could make me responsible for what he did. The legal proceedings had been educational for Ashley in ways that years of family lectures had never accomplished. Meeting with lawyers, reviewing police reports, and calculating financial damages had forced her to confront the real-world implications of her choices rather than relying on family members to shield her from consequences. Brad faced his own legal consequences, including a 6-month jail sentence for repeat driving violations, mandatory alcohol counseling, and suspension of his driving privileges for 2 years. His wealthy family hired expensive attorneys who managed to minimize his criminal charges, but they made it clear that they would not provide financial assistance for civil damages resulting from his actions. My parents underwent their own transformation during this period, prompted by a family counseling session that Tom and I had insisted on as a condition for any ongoing relationship. Dr. Martinez, a licensed family therapist with experience in addiction and enabling behaviors, helped my parents recognize how their differential treatment of their daughters had contributed to Ashley's sense of entitlement and my feelings of resentment. Pat and Linda, I want you to think about the messages you've been sending to both of your daughters through your actions over the past few years, Dr. Martinez said during our 3rd session. When you consistently rescue Ashley from consequences while expecting Jan to sacrifice her own needs for family harmony, what are you teaching each of them about responsibility and self-worth? The counseling process was difficult for my parents, who had convinced themselves that their favoritism toward Ashley was justified by her youth and need for guidance. Confronting the reality that their enabling behavior had actually harmed Ashley's development while taking advantage of my responsible nature required them to reconsider fundamental assumptions about parenting and fairness. We thought we were helping Ashley learn to navigate adult responsibilities gradually, Mom admitted during one particularly emotional session. But I can see now that we were actually preventing her from learning those lessons by always providing a safety net that let her avoid consequences. Dad struggled more with accepting responsibility for the family dynamics, initially insisting that both daughters had received equal treatment throughout their lives. But when Dr. T.P. Martinez asked him to provide specific examples of times when I had received the same level of financial support and consequence protection that Ashley enjoyed, he was unable to identify any comparable instances. I suppose we did expect Jan to be more independent because she seemed more mature and capable of handling responsibilities, Dad finally acknowledged. But that might not have been fair to her, and it definitely wasn't helpful for Ashley's development. The counseling sessions continued for 6 months, during which my parents gradually developed more awareness of how their enabling behavior had affected both daughters differently. They began setting clearer expectations for Ashley's behavior, while also acknowledging the ways they had taken advantage of my reliability and generosity. Ashley's transformation was perhaps the most surprising aspect of the entire situation. Working part-time at a local restaurant while attending college gave her first-hand experience with earning money and managing financial responsibilities. For the first time in her life, she understood the connection between work, effort, and available resources. I never realized how much money you had to save to buy a car. January, Ashley said during a family dinner 6 months after the San Diego incident. Working 20 hours a week just to pay for car repairs makes me understand why you were so upset when I treated your car carelessly. I would be furious if someone damaged something I had worked that hard to afford. Ashley's new job also introduced her to a social circle that included other college students who worked to support themselves rather than relying entirely on family financial support. These friendships helped her develop different perspectives on responsibility, independence, and the relationship between effort and reward. My coworkers think it's weird that I'm 23 and just now learning how to budget for basic expenses, Ashley continued. Most of them have been managing their own money since high school, and they don't understand why anyone would expect their family to pay for entertainment and luxury purchases. Tom and I grew closer throughout this process, both individually and as a couple. Watching him handle the legal and financial complexities of Ashley's unauthorized car use with patience and fairness showed me qualities I had never seen during our more casual relationship dynamics. He supported my decision to set boundaries with my family while taking responsibility for his own role in the situation. I have to admit, I was nervous about getting involved in your family drama, Tom said during a conversation about our relationship future. But seeing how you handled this whole situation with planning and strategy instead of just reacting emotionally made me respect you in completely new ways. Our relationship deepened as we navigated complex legal and financial decisions together, and we began discussing longer-term plans for marriage and shared financial goals. The car situation had demonstrated our ability to function as a team during stressful circumstances while maintaining individual integrity and values. The resolution of the car ownership issue also had practical benefits for my career and personal life. With Ashley no longer assuming unlimited access to my transportation, I could accept business opportunities that required flexible scheduling and reliable vehicle access. My job performance improved significantly, leading to a promotion and salary increase that made it easier to achieve other financial goals. 6 months after transferring the car ownership back to my name through dissolution of the trust agreement, I traded in the sedan for a newer model with better safety features and improved reliability. Ashley admired the new car during family gatherings but never asked to borrow it, having developed her own transportation arrangements through her job and social connections. I love your new car, Jan, but I'm actually kind of proud that I've figured out how to get around without needing to borrow vehicles from other people, Ashley said. Having my own bus pass and rideshare budget makes me feel more independent and responsible. The family relationships eventually stabilized around new patterns that respected each person's individual needs and responsibilities. My parents learned to treat both daughters more equally, offering support without enabling dependent behavior. Ashley developed genuine appreciation for the effort required to maintain adult responsibilities, and I learned to set clear boundaries while maintaining loving relationships with family members. Dr. Martinez helped us establish ongoing communication strategies that would prevent similar conflicts in the future. Family meetings became monthly opportunities to address concerns before they escalated into major problems, and each family member learned to express their needs directly, rather than using guilt or manipulation to achieve desired outcomes. The most important lesson for all of you is that healthy relationships require both generous support and clear boundaries. Dr. Martinez explained during our final counseling session. Jan, you learned to protect your own interests while still caring about your family's well-being. Ashley, you learned that other people's generosity is a gift, not an entitlement. Pat and Linda, you learned that true parental love sometimes means allowing children to face consequences rather than rescuing them from their choices. 1 year later, Ashley graduated from college with a business degree and immediately found employment with a marketing firm that valued her newfound work ethic and financial responsibility. She had developed budgeting skills, professional networking abilities, and personal accountability that served her well in adult life. During Ashley's graduation celebration, she gave a speech thanking family members for their support throughout her college years. When she reached my part of the speech, she said something that brought tears to my eyes. Jan, I owe you a special apology for the way I treated your generosity and your property. You tried to teach me about responsibility and consequences for years, but I wasn't ready to listen until I had to face real problems on my own. Thank you for loving me enough to let me learn those lessons, even when it was difficult and painful for both of us. The experience taught me that sometimes protecting yourself legally teaches your family more about respect than years of trying to be the accommodating daughter. When people take advantage of your generosity, the kindest thing you can do is let them face the natural consequences of their choices, because that's how they learn to make better decisions in the future. Standing in my parents' backyard during Ashley's graduation party, watching my sister interact confidently with her new colleagues and discuss her career goals with genuine enthusiasm, I realized that our family had emerged stronger and healthier from the crisis. Ashley had developed into a responsible adult. My parents had learned to offer support without enabling dependence, and I had discovered the power of clear boundaries combined with unconditional love. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and grow into their full potential as a responsible, accountable human being. Thank you for following along with my story about family boundaries, legal protection, and the sometimes painful but necessary process of helping people we love learn to take responsibility for their choices. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? How did you handle situations where your loved one's needs conflicted with your own well-being and financial security? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own family challenges. Subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and protecting yourself while maintaining loving relationships. Share this video with friends who might be struggling with similar situations where family loyalty conflicts with personal boundaries. I hope my experience can help others find the courage to stand up for their own needs while still supporting the people they care about.